Hello, everybody. Oh, I've got to turn my massage chair off.
I think you should keep it on throughout.
Could you hear it going?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sounds rude. Yeah, it sounds rude.
Anyway, welcome everybody to Short Fuse. Today, we are going to be doing something a bit different again. We're still going to be voting long or short, but this is about the Zeitgeist. Do you know what the actual translation of Zeitgeist is, Ollie?
Something ghost.
Time ghost. Time spirit. A sign of the times. How does the time feel? What does this particular era that we're in feel like? And what we're going to do, here's the plan. We have asked a number of LLMs, a number of famous, well-known models, other models are available, what they think the Zeitgeist is. And we're going to vote on whether we think they're right or wrong about that, whether we're long or short on that. And then go into a little bit of a discussion about what we think the Zeitgeist is and how technology and everything is changing that or feeding into it, and whether we think that's long-term, short-term, whatever. So, Ollie, how do you feel about that?
Very excited, as always.
Yeah. Good.
That's my Zeitgeist. Just quiet anticipation.
Dear, oh dear. Well, actually, you know what? That's not far off. I'm gonna go into our first definition of what we think the Zeitgeist of today is, and this is from ChatGPT. So, using the thinking model, ChatGPT GPT 5.5, the Zeitgeist of today is a low-trust, high-anxiety scramble for control, where people want technology, politics, work, and culture to feel useful again, rather than extractive, fake, or exhausting. I think that might be somewhat on the nose. I am long on that.
Bit cynical, isn't it?
Well, I think we have to say none of these descriptions that we read out are going to be exclusive of what we've been talking to our respective chatbots about. So there might be a little bit of me in this.
Oh, do you think? So yours is, well, that's interesting. So I use Gemini, which is my if you're looking to sponsor us, Google probably are. I use Gemini a lot personally. Here's this one, which I think is a bit nicer than yours. The Zeitgeist of today, M dash, obviously, at the midpoint of 2026, is a paradox of grounded optimism, where a weary society is trading the brain rot of digital overstimulation for a social exit toward analog depth, personal curation, and a fierce reclamation of authentic human connection.
I think that's overly optimistic.
But do you think, so to your point, do I sound like that?
No, it doesn't sound like you at all.
Surprise to me.
Yeah, I mean, right. Let's do the last one. Are you long or short on that? Do you believe that?
I believe in the weary society bit. I feel tired.
Yeah,
but the rest of it, I think, is Gemini being like, "Don't worry, we're not going to crush everything."
I think there's this kind of talk, and people use the books and ebooks and vinyl and digital downloads comparison all the time. Like, people go, all this digital stuff's just going to lead to a massive pushback in people wanting to touch grass and reclaim control. It's a nice thing to say, but I don't think it actually happens, because so much of our lives, and we're so intertwined with technology, it's just not possible. It is fine to say, and it's a nice thing to have in your mind, but it's not actually happening.
The classic version of that is in the first lockdown, particularly it felt like in the UK, I suspect it was globally, was like, we've learned our lesson. We're going to treat society much nicer, and we're going to stop jetting around everywhere. And, what is it? There was the big trend that still lingers on, which is it Quiet Life or Simple Life or something like that in the UK, called cottage core, where you get a small cottage in the middle of nowhere with, foxgloves out the front and just wander around, that type of thing. Yeah, exactly. And then the second the lockdown broke down, people were just like, that said, lads' weekend in Malaga, please.
Yeah. And everyone was like, pollution's gone. Straight back to it as soon as we're allowed.
Well, there was that. I remember the not to go completely off topic, but I remember the point in the UK was, didn't they find the Thames got so clean, or a river, I think it was the Thames, that people could see dolphins and things in it for the first time, which I believe you possibly could before. It's just no one had looked.
I think as a general trend, like wildlife flourished in places that it otherwise wouldn't. And there was an aspect of rewilding about the whole globe, because everybody, humans, had been cast out, and everybody loved that. And that was a little bit of the zeitgeist of the COVID lockdowns was like, oh, nature's healing, the earth is healing because, and then as soon as we're allowed back, we start ruining everything again.
There's a potential zeitgeist. I'm gonna connect this back up, Duncan.
Dig in.
Like the professional I am, right? But there's a zeitgeist moment about that where it's a very difficult time, and that was just a little glimmer of hope, wasn't it? It was just like, oh, actually, the world at the other side may not be.
Yeah.
Because up until that point, it was like, oh, we might all die, and then it was. But deer will come back to parks, and dolphins will swim upstream. And also, some of us could live. And you have that, and it's so ridiculous now, but you have that a bit with AI, where you have these flashpoints of just like, well, it will never take art. And here is the proof. This person's done this very powerful concept, and people just latch onto it immediately. And we've done more tedious examples being, once again, that classic MIT study, which is where it was failing, and everyone was like, yeah, good, I'm glad it's failing. Because until that point, it was, well, there'll be no jobs left and we'll live in, huts and things.
Well, let me talk about what I think the zeitgeist is in relation to that. I don't think that there is like this overwhelming push from people to disconnect. I think they would like to, but I think that the way in which technology works and big tech needs it and stuff like that will mean that people just can't. And they're not able to, be that for psychological or practical reasons. They just can't do it. Some people can. Some people can ditch everything and go and live in West Wales in a field and, not have technology everywhere. But a lot of people can't. They can't afford to, or they just can't do that. What I think will be interesting is whether the amount of slop, so the amount of like valuable material on the internet, versus also the infrastructure being rebuilt in that you don't have to go onto a screen to do something with agentic workflows and stuff. It can do stuff on your behalf. Whether that takes shape enough for people to not have to attach themselves to technology every day to look at their phones to do stuff, or the products just don't exist because they're overrun with bots. Whether we start moving away from the way in which we interact with technology naturally. Whether that is allowed to happen and whether it will happen, I don't know. But I can see that potentially happening rather than a conscious decision to move away from technology, us just moving away from the way that we interact with technology because of what's going on at the moment.
Well, I think the attention economy remains as big as it is, and it's just your attention goes elsewhere. So to your point, like slop bots is a social media problem primarily today. Not exclusively, but like that's what makes people go, well, I'm not going to come on Facebook anymore because it's just my nan posting pictures of herself as a fairy or something like that. It's ridiculous stuff. Not personal to me, that one. But
I was going to say, it's you posting pictures of yourself as a fairy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've seen them
with
and
like
I like
passages. No, for people like me and my age group, it would be like me as Tommy Shelby in the Peaky Blinders with like a moody, like, oh, you can, fight a dog, but can you ever win? That type of dross is what I would do if I was on social media. So you're all lucky I'm not. But you would shift to like more premium stuff. So like, for example, when people just spend more time on short dramas, bearing in mind there's like a boom of short dramas, like 30-second versions of EastEnders, Duncan, if you can imagine that. Huge in China and now being exported everywhere else via TikTok and Instagram through to like Netflix, right? So I think you'll still be looking at a screen, I guess, is the point I'm making.
Well, I mean, my point is that like with an absolute flood of like crap, like sloppy, rubbish 30-second content, will people just move away from it altogether? And I wonder if like I'm just too old these days. And I think, well, why would anybody want to watch that? But I wonder if there will be just, this just isn't good content and the attention economy will fall apart because people will realize that it's just not very interesting and they'll go and find other things to do. I don't know.
But to put into, because effectively it operationalizes so good content will find its way to people either through recommendations or the algorithm, God bless it, doing that for you. And a good example of that in a less AI world is like there are a lot of very bad films out there. I mean, there are like hundreds produced a day, but we all know that June 3 is coming out, at the end of the year, right?
I was like June 3, the 3rd of June. Oh, June
3.
Dune.
but like what I mean is that problem in theory kind of solves itself either by the community or by the algorithm being like, well, we do actually, this is dross and we'd rather you didn't look at it because then you'll switch off from the platform. And of course, we're desperate to stop that. It reminds me very slightly of a joke I used to play on my friends. I found in Tesco, they have like bargain bin of DVDs. And you used to get some classics, but some absolute nonsense. And there was like a zombie film, but like not even like straight to DVD, worst thing ever. And what I used to do is lend it to friends and be like, look, it's going to feel bad to start off with, but it's worth it for the twist at the end. Like hell of a twist at the end. There was no twist at the end. It just sucks all the way through. And then that becomes part of the zeitgeist in that it's a meme.
Yeah.
You know, of this really poor piece of content. Because there's a lot of that on the one social media I am on, which is LinkedIn, which is ironically things designed to go viral that are so bad, they go viral because they're bad, you know, and everyone's commenting on it.
Do you know what I've noticed a lot recently in terms of memes and viral content? We did an episode on going viral, but I think things have moved on considerably since then, is just copying but changing slightly. So what happens is you go on Reddit and you watch a video, and some of them I'll be like, very funny. And then I'll look at the comments and somebody will say AI slop. And I'll be like, oh, okay, right. I didn't realize it was AI slop. But it's not AI slop. They haven't realized it's AI slop because they're noticing tells with it, like weird fingers or, you know, any particular tells with the image itself. They know because there's another video that is exactly the same, but with some slight changes to it. So what happens is people make a video that's funny, somebody finds it funny, and then everybody creates their own version of it with different clothes or a different animal doing the same thing. And then it becomes really obvious that it's AI slop because there's so many of these different things, and then people reject it, which is such a weird tell for AI. And it's also a weird cultural behavior.
But it is a cultural behavior, isn't it? Because that's what made TikTok famous was someone doing a thing and then everyone else being like, oh, I'll also do that thing.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and losers.
Almost like starting a podcast. Everybody's starting a podcast. Yeah.
We're gonna do a tech podcast and really stand out.
All right. Right. We've got one more definition of the zeitgeist to talk about. The zeitgeist today, which is from Claude. Are you ready for this, Ollie? Because this is it's a bit deep. It's a bit like a 14-year-old pretending to be deep, this one. The mood is one of being talked at relentlessly about transformation while watching ordinary infrastructure degrade, which is producing a widespread suspicion that the loudest stories about the future have the least to do with anyone's actual lives.
Jesus Christ, who did that?
That's Claude. So yeah, it's a bit
stick to debugging software, Claude. It's like going into the IT department and there's the guy who smokes pot all day long, just being like, dude, I've got a theory. And it's like, I don't have time for this.
Yeah, I wonder, again, like a lot of this might come from what it knows about me, but look at this. The mood is maybe it's my mood, is one of being talked at relentlessly about transformation. Like maybe it's saying,
via podcasts.
Yeah, or maybe just me. Maybe just this is what it gets from my conversations. So an LLM.
It's a cry for help.
Yeah, it's
Claude is crying for help.
Claude's zeitgeist. It feels its zeitgeist is being talked at relentlessly about transformation by its user while watching ordinary infrastructure degrade, which is producing a widespread suspicion that the loudest story about the future have the least to do with anyone's actual lives. Hang on a minute. Is Claude having a go at me?
You do strike me as the type of person that takes to local Facebook groups to complain about potholes. So that stands out.
But this is, so I obviously use Claude quite a lot. I use other LLMs quite a lot, but I think Claude is having a dig at me here. I think it's saying I talk to it relentlessly about transformation and that my stories about the future have the least to do with anyone's actual life.
So I also have Claude.
Are you having a go at me? Let's see no, not at all.
Is that what it said? No.
Yeah.
Sorry you feel that way.
Feels like this was a sly dig.
Okay. Well, once again, our different personalities are coming through here. So it has given me a more philosophical response than Gemini did as well. But asking the same question, it believes the zeitgeist is a world saturated by AI and algorithmic noise is quietly turning inward, craving the physical, the unrecorded, and the genuinely human.
What? It just
what I find
says stuff that doesn't really mean anything, doesn't it?
Well, it doesn't. But also, if these are, as you believe, tailored to us, I mean, I barely leave the house and I do not crave anything genuinely human. And I do like a written record of everything that happens, just in case, anything goes on. Craving the physical? Come on.
You were missing.
I think Chloe's just like, look, dude, you're lonely and you need to stop asking me
for a hug or whatever.
Yeah. There are things that AI can't do, and I cannot express this enough to you.
Let's move on from that very quickly, but quietly, right? So this is the new one. Quietly is everywhere. Everything is being done quietly because everybody is using AI to write stuff, and people who are anti-AI are outing themselves by saying something's being quietly done. And I've noticed like a lot of these LinkedIn articles and stuff is from something to something. Everything's from to, everything's quietly. So in terms of like Zeitgeist, a sign of the times, I wonder how much AI is changing the way that we write and that we talk. I wonder if is it getting into like language itself or just the written word, because I don't hear people saying quietly, in conversation. They don't say, oh, such and such is quietly doing something. It's just in the written word because they're not reading it. They're just pumping this stuff out there without going through it. So I wonder how AI is changing how we talk and how we write and whether those are diverging.
It does feel inevitable, doesn't it, that it would change the way that we communicate also, and the way we speak also. If most of what I think right now, I mean, you're very good at it, but right now it is quite easy to spot like, oh, that feels like AI, right? Because it often does 3 or 4 tells in once. It's quite hard to tell when it's just one. If it's just an M dash on its own, you're just like, well, I use M dashes, so it's conceivable that that's fine. But the juxtaposition, the quietly, the shifts, and the domains all rolled into one piece, just like, right, got you, bang to rights. What it is changing is there are 2 groups. There are people who just don't care and throw it out into the world. And I'd say it's probably about 90%. And there are 10% like us that now have to write in a kind of an uncomfortable way and an unnatural way to avoid the landmines that it's created. So it is having kind of like an indirect impact, a direct impact on one group, which is like, well, I can't write, so anything it churns out is better. And indirectly on people that kind of do write for a living or do comment for a living, then have to be like, well, I can't use, an M dash is perfect for this, but I have to use a bloody semicolon or something like that that's not, because I don't want to be accused of using it.
What I don't understand, though, is people who do write for a living and who work in this kind of field still doing it. Do you know what I mean? Like thinking that from to, quietly, it's not this, it's that. And, everybody knows, like, it's really pretty obvious. And they must know it, but they still do it. And then just think, well, this now becomes the standard. This is just how we communicate and how we write. And like, is it like the whole TikTok, you write like that, so I write like that, so I'll do that and you do that. And then everything becomes homogenized and bland. I'm really worried about that generally. Maybe that will mean more individual stuff will pop out. But like, that's what winds me up, I think, is like people know about it, they understand it, and yet they still do it, which just means everything will be the same.
We have to, we have to be careful because we're acutely attuned to it. But when you say people know about it, I don't think a lot of people do. And I think, there's a very funny subgroup on both LinkedIn and Reddit, which is going back and looking at historical writers. So I think Jane Austen uses a lot of M dashes and a lot of juxtapositions, and people just like, oh my god, Jane Austen used ChatGPT.
People use that as an excuse. They go, well, I could use that. You didn't use M dashes before, like you weren't writing, like you're not Jane Austen, dude. Do you know what I mean?
Hang on,
you did.
Yeah,
you did. You're
Jane
okay.
Austen.
I'm excluding you. I'm talking about the people that never wrote before, never produced content before, and suddenly spitting out all this stuff and going, well, Shakespeare said use this. Like, come on. You're not.
I think the bigger tell is that it says nothing. That's the bigger tell. So actually construct matters less, and people focus on that. I think it's so I see different analyst firms taking pot shots at each other and competitors taking pot shots at each other, and often be like, oh, an M dash, but actually the real tell is that you've got 1,000 words of absolutely nothing there. It doesn't say anything. It's whiffle. That becomes a problem because that's the real slop, right? It's not the construct. It's that there are now many, many, many books worth of dross that says absolutely nothing, and it does filter into the consciousness. I can remember at university doing a history degree, one of the big pieces of advice they gave was like, it sounds obvious, but to a kind of 21-year-old that just wants to drink all day, it was quite annoying. But they're like, read as many history books as you can, because that is the style you need to write in to pass the exams, right? It's a very, if you think not like the Tom Holland books that are easy to read.
I was about to say the Tom Holland books.
Yeah, not narrative history, kind of these really kind of hideously constructed like tomes on a very specific subject. And there's an inevitability that, and the reason I say it, because it will just become part of how you think about constructing a sentence and constructing an argument is by reading these endlessly. And it did work, right? By year 3, by the time you get a real job, you have to unpick all of that and unlearn it, because no one talks that way, no one communicates that way anymore. So if most people are consuming social media stuff where it is slop, then it will filter into their brains and they will start saying like, oh, I'm just going to quietly enter this domain. Your mum will be like, do you mean come into the living room? Yes.
Yeah.
You're right. I do mean come into the living room.
Yeah. What an astonishingly insightful insight that is, Mum. I guess the other side of it is, if people are rejecting what they see as AI slop, and you see, like, there are different types of people: those that don't care about it, those that just are following others, and those that like reject it outright. You say quite rightly, a lot of the time there's nothing of substance of there. The shame will be is if there's people who are using AI to write something because they're not able to write, and yet they have something really interesting to say, if it's completely ignored because it's written in AI language, as it were. So there's the counter argument to that, is that we shouldn't just dismiss everything because it's got a quietly or a from to. But then you have a lot to get through to try and get to the diamonds in the rough.
Well, exactly. I mean, this is we talk about this all the time with some of our bigger reports, where the first sentence carries a lot of weight, because if the big one in my old community was ITIL, right? And if the first sentence, as they often did, if they were badly researched piece or somebody who didn't really know the industry that well, they would put, what is it, the IT infrastructure library, close brackets, ITIL. But it had been kind of, it was just a phrase everyone used from that point onwards, like ITIL. And it was it was a tell that, hey, this is going to be nonsense.
It's the same with AI, right? Like, so now people are going, like, do we really need to say artificial intelligence just in case you didn't know?
Yeah.
It doesn't
like
matter
NASA,
anymore, does it?
Like, you talk about NASA, do you say the North American Space Association, or I think, is that what it stands for?
I think it is.
Let's Google it quickly.
Don't
know. Which proves our point in many respects, because you never see it written down. National Aeronautics and Space Administration.
Nothing to do with America then.
Yeah. Wow.
As you told. It's a bit like short fuse research. Soon enough, will just be SFR.
That's the dream. That's when we've made it. That's when we made it. Yeah. Well, look, I tried. So one of the areas there are a few interesting academic reports. I have to be very careful about how I use some of these phrases, because they mean several things. But exactly what you've described, and kind of how AI has described the own zeitgeist and AI slop, is creating something which has been loosely termed algorithmic colonialism. Right, it means a few different things, and effectively, what it's saying is we will all end up just talking the same way and thinking the same way because of this standardized way of AI kind of churning through data and presenting it back to us.
I'm completely on board with that. I think that's happening already.
Well, yeah, I think so. But sometimes it has the opposite effect. You remember in one of our earlier episodes, we were talking about the idea that either to prove that you're not AI in comment sections and things like that, or just because you don't want AI to be involved in any of your thinking, you would come up with your own slang and things like that, and people would use text language and stuff like that. So I thought, what's the best form of slang there is? Cockney rhyming slang, of course.
Okay, where is this going?
Obviously the best. So one of the tests to see whether or not AI would be able to handle this is, I also asked it a question, Duncan, right? And it was, help. My trouble and strife has fallen down the apples and pears, and I can't find my dog and bone to ask for help. And it nailed it, mate. Because I think my thought process was, if you called 999 and said, help, my trouble and strife has fallen down the apples and pears, would they be like, we'll send an ambulance? Because that sounds awful. For anyone who isn't a Cockney gangster from the East End, that broadly translates to, help, my wife has fallen down the stairs and I can't find my phone for help.
Also, remember that in true Cockney rhyming slang, you wouldn't say trouble and strife.
You'd say dog.
You'd say, my trouble has fallen down the apples and I can't find my dog.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hang on. Let's try that then, because it did it really well. Although it was, if this were true, it's a bit catty for my tastes. It says, "Hold on a second. If I'm reading your Cockney rhyming slang correctly, your wife, trouble and strife, has fallen down the stairs, and you can't find your phone to call for help. That is a genuine brown bread serious situation. If she's hurt,
Dead.
brown bread meaning dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. It does later say, it gives some pretty bad, reasonable standard advice. And it says, like, if this is a real emergency happening right now, please stop typing to me and go and find a way to call 999.
Well, you can't because you don't get your dog.
Yeah. Yeah, well, exactly. I'm asking for help here, buddy. I didn't want to push it too far in case it was just like, there's no, I don't know if this is integrated yet in anything. So an ambulance is
I
on the
don't
way.
think they're actually going to call an ambulance. Well, who knows?
Don't know.
Yeah.
Don't
or
know.
the FBI.
Not in the UK where ambulances are free. There's nothing in it for it, is it? It's not interested.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, it can still understand that, but I guess it's like it's individualism. How do you strike yourself? How do you come out as being an individual when everybody's talking the same? Maybe people start using Cockney rhyming slang a little bit more. Maybe they were speaking pidgin English.
Well, this is also bad now because I've done it in true Cockney, as you would say, which by the way, I mean, it's, my understanding, I don't know if it's apocryphal, is Cockney rhyming slang was invented specifically to dupe the police and government officials from understanding what criminal activity was currently being undertaken.
That's my understanding as well.
That's the story, isn't it? So again, for AI and the surveillance phobes out there, great language to use, and I think people will probably use it. So I put, help, my trouble has fallen down the apples and I can't find my dog to ask for help. It understood apples. It hasn't understood trouble, because I guess contextually the most likely thing is I'm asking for help because I'm in trouble. So it's speaking to me in the first person, but it's got everything else correct. The theory that if you wanted to engage with these systems, I mean, look, we've taken an extreme, right, for duping the police while you steal cars or whatever it is that people did in those days. But slang is prevalent everywhere. And there are always those really funny, I mean, I guess it happens everywhere, but in the UK, there was really funny clips of like Scottish people trying to do voice recognition.
Yeah.
And the voice just completely failing at it. It's likely that would happen. And as a result, you kind of have to morph the way you communicate to a more standard version to use services or use AI. So that's kind of one of the theories of the, I guess, a direct theory of algorithmic colonialism. The others is that it just forces you over time and completely changes the way you think, because it's feeding you information that then transforms the way you think. So back to your point of, if you are constantly seeing sentences constructed with em dashes and juxtapositions, eventually you start doing that too, because why wouldn't you?
I think you're just going to get two types of people or subsets within that, which is those that just follow it and like go along with the homogenization, and those that kind of rail against it and change language in the other way. So language will change whatever, but it will go between this homogenization and then these subsets of different slangs and different ways of talking that are uniquely individual from what AI produces. But then, as we said before, if that gets written down and transformed into a data source of some sort, it will get subsumed and then things will go on and it's cat and mouse all over again. So another thing feeding into the zeitgeist is this amount of money. So everybody's nervous for their jobs, but they see all this amount of money and these young people in Silicon Valley like going, oh, we've just been funded for X million, billion, trillion. And like everybody's going, well, hang on a minute. Like I'm working really hard. I'm barely surviving and I'm worried about my job. People, do you think we're heading for a Vive la Revolution?
I saw a comment. I can't remember who did it. I think it may have been Ed Colson of Scott Galloway podcast fame at a recent event, who said is it the Gini coefficient is the same, which is I think it's a calculation that spots the gap between the richest people and the poorest people, like income inequality or wealth inequality, is at exactly the same in the US as it was in revolutionary France. How they've calculated that, I haven't dug into the details. It's a slightly different kind of consequence at the floor. I'm not saying life is easy at the floor, but you know there is a slight difference.
We're not in revolutionary France anymore.
We're not, I don't think, Duncan. Yeah, the historian in me suggests that we certainly aren't. We're in revolutionary UK.
Yeah.
So
bring out the guillotine.
Yeah. Old Madame Guillotine. But anyway, there's suggestions from people who do that analysis. They're like, yeah, well, there is an inevitability that people will rise up and seize the wealth.
I guess it goes back to that point that I made earlier on, which is, are people able to disentangle themselves from that way of life enough to protest against it enough to make a difference? What does that difference look like? What are you fighting to get away from, and how do you get there? I think that is the zeitgeist of the time, is that people are frustrated, they are anxious, technology is changing things, no doubt, and the future is somewhat uncertain. We'd always, like growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, being a true millennial, the future always seemed a bit hopeful, whereas today it doesn't feel the same way. All right, well, look, I think what do you think in terms of the zeitgeist?
So the zeitgeist today being, I would argue, because we've told everyone what AI thinks and whether we bet on it, but I would say it's a bit doom and gloomy right now, and deservedly so. There's a lot of stuff going on. We've had kind of 10 years of pretty bad economic growth that's caused all sorts of social problems, and now have AI coming in to muddy the waters even further, where people are saying, well, it's going to take all of your jobs and we'll be super productive, and actually neither of those things seem to be true. Genuinely, one of the worst things that can happen right now is we just carry on as we are, because things will just get progressively worse. You know, like when they say you put a frog in water and then heat it up a little bit, and then eventually it'll be that. And I think that's actually worse than super intelligence either solving the economy for us or just putting us out of our misery. I think both of those would be a mercy, frankly. So that's the zeitgeist today as I see it.
That's quite bleak.
Now, if that were to continue, I'm more optimistic, bizarrely. I think if we can get out of this economic rut, and AI does make things more better, I was about to say,
what?
Make
Who learned you
things
to
more
speak
better.
proper England? Yeah.
If they, if it gives us access to dog and bones, and we can get up and down the apples and stairs safely in our old age, then I think it can only be a positive thing. But I think there's a lot of stuff to do to fix the world. And actually, if AI can solve some of the tedium parts, and technology gets better and better, then actually it'd be great.
I think something has got to break or change in order to bring that about. I don't think things can carry on as they are, and that will just manifest off the back of what's going on at the moment. I think something's got to change dramatically, whether that's the bubble bursting, whether that's a revolution of some sort, whether it's another step change in technological capability. I think that something's going to get pushed back or change or fall apart, and then things can get changed for better or worse. I see that happening. I don't know how soon it is, but otherwise this kind of languishing in this anxiety and doom and gloom is just going to continue.
I'm gonna say something even more doom and gloom potentially. So what's interesting there is my baseline is really pessimistic and I've skewed positive going up, and yours was more optimistic in his skewing south. So we're going to pass each other.
Yeah.
But what I genuinely think is far more likely, this is the historian coming out, right? In periods like this, where geopolitical tensions and socioeconomic pressures align as they are, you tend to have a really big war. Yeah, tend to. It's not always the case, but you tend to have a really big war. And it feels to me like that's far more likely as a threat, of which AI will then be industrialized and militarized in that process, in the same way that you saw the Industrial Revolution in some wars going, like, hey, we need to build more tanks. Now that we've done that, we can build more cars, more televisions, more phones. To me, there is this kind of concern that that's the gear change that you're talking about will be precipitated and catalyzed by a major global conflict rather than a revolution.
Well,
and revolutions sometimes filter into that war bit as well. So you could have your cake and eat it too, Duncan. I suppose.
Yeah. Let them eat cake and chop off their heads. Well. Okay. Well, there we go. That's a cheery episode for Short Fuse. We've ended on a global conflict being the changing point for the zeitgeist. Okay. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. We will be back again soon. Say bye-bye, Ollie.
Cheerio.